Hello, everyone. Thanks for tuning in today. I hope you're having an amazing Stoneridge Connect event. I am Tracy Ottenstroer, and let's go ahead and kick off. Um, you are at Copilot. Where do I start? What we've learned. You've got Scott Frappier here and myself. Today, this is our agenda. So we are going to talk about Copilot as an emerging technology and what that means for you. We're going to drive in what the business value is to Copilot. We've done this with so many clients. We want to really teach you what we're seeing and kind of where to start, which is number three. So, what your business value is, and then where do we go? Like, where do we even begin in this AI journey? And then what you can expect from your modern day partners. So we've got a lot to cover. So let's just do some quick introductions. Scott, do you want to get started?
Yeah, Tracy, we only have 30 minutes. It's amazing how much content we've got to cover in 30 minutes here. But yeah, as an introduction, I'm already wasting time, right? My name is Scott Frappier, as Tracy mentioned. My role at Stoneridge is the Chief AI Architect. So, really, kind of what that means is that I've basically focused on AI workloads inside of our business systems. And really, the reason I'm focused on that role is before the AI Architect role, I was really the Chief Software Architect. And what that means is that I take all these different components or tools, such as M365 or Azure or Dynamics, to address a business need. I've been in the industry now for over 20 years. I came right out of college and somehow got into the business system space, and I absolutely love it. So it's a really exciting time right now, obviously, with this emergent technology. Yeah, Tracy, and I'm just really looking forward to helping support you today as we go through this conversation.
And that's what you do, Scott. You support me. I appreciate that. All right, I'm Tracy Ottenstroer. I'm in the client success role at Stoneridge here. I'm also the Copilot program manager, which I failed to put on this presenter slide. But I am definitely Copilot obsessed. I've been with Stoneridge for 3 years now, and it's such an honor. I just absolutely love being part of this company. But I've come from many industries. So what I love about this is that having that industry experience has brought me to help a lot of our clients in so many ways. And I've always been a software nerd, so it's really fun to be at the forefront of this technology specifically. It's like nothing else that we've ever seen. And I think that kind of goes to our first topic. So it is an emerging technology. And Scott, I'd love for you to take this and kind of talk through the slides that we have.
Yeah,
What does that mean?
that's a really good question because there are like, if you back up and think about the business system space, it's kind of been the same for quite some period of time. And if you've been in this space, you'll know what that statement means. And if you haven't, let me give a little bit of a background with it. So, inside of business systems, like, if you even think about some of the older systems that are out there that were used, like open systems, there's just a ton of different ones, obviously, that you may have worked with as well, even older SAP versions or older Oracle versions. I mean, the core of a business system has always been transactionally to keep track of what you're doing inside of a business, doing general ledger entries, doing inventory movements, doing warehouse management processes. And you can argue in some situations that business systems 20 to 30 years ago are basically the same as what they do now. We have different types of GUIs and different types of technologies that we use to transfer this data and to analyze it, but the core is still pretty much the same. Now, with the advent of really the large language models that we know about, right? The GPT-4 model, for example, which was a huge success, there's been this huge shift in how we can actually now interact with technology. And this is what we classify then as an emergent technology. And candidly, in my career, probably the last biggest emergent technology that impacted business systems and the way we interact with machines really was, if you focus around like the introduction of the iPhone. You can argue that there are other types of devices that came before that, like PDAs and things of that nature. But the iPhone, the touch interface, the ability to have basically a tablet now or any of those types of interfaces really changed how mobility worked and how we interacted with computers. And now we're starting to see this now, obviously, with AI. So, what that really means for us is that we have to re examine once again with the emergent technologies how we can actually use these tools to basically make it so that businesses can thrive, right? And I love the picture here of the growth with it because, quite candidly, it's a seed that started about a year and a half, almost 2 years ago. And now we have partners that are getting more experience. We have infrastructure that's being built out more. We've got use cases that are starting to come to light more that people are starting to use as well. And overall, Tracy, like in terms of that technology, we're just seeing more and more come out of it. So, like I said, we're going to talk a little bit more about the emerging capabilities here because I know when somebody says that, like I had, for example, Tracy, on one of the sessions almost 8 years ago, this person said that we're not going to use mice anymore when we're interacting with computers, and I was just like, that doesn't feel right to me, right? Type of a thing. Whereas this is a technology that it's not just an objective perspective that we can apply towards it, it's also an emotional perspective that I will just say can be pretty groundbreaking for your organization. So let's kind of talk a little bit more about that, Tracy. And I think we've got some other slides that we can kind of go through that emerging perspective here. And I guess for me, starting kind of like with what Copilot does is really the most critical portion here. So inside of Copilot, you can imagine it basically as a service that Microsoft designed. You think about like OneDrive as a service, right, where you save data basically to OneDrive. You don't know about how that app connects and then does all that saving of data. You just know when you open up Explorer or if you go to a website, OneDrive.com as an example, or what was it before, SkyDrive or something like that. I forgot what it was, right? But anyways, what happens is you'll connect to it and you'll then be able to interact with your files. And that's a service basically that Microsoft has created for it. Well, Copilot works in the same fashion. And what it is it's what they call the orchestrator. It's almost like the architect, right, from the Matrix. Basically, what the orchestrator does is that it basically takes different types of commands that come from an application, such as Word, PowerPoint, Dynamics 365, whatever it is that's Copilot enabled, even inside of like a Power App or a Canvas app, for example. And what it does is it goes into your tenant, potentially grabs some of that data, such as emails, contacts, business system data, brings that data then and creates a prompt and basically brings it to what we call that large language model, which is what you've heard, the GPT-4 Omni and those different types of models, takes that and interprets it, and then brings that data back to basically do some security checks against it and make sure everything's okay. Because from a corporate perspective, we've got to be very cautious, obviously, on that data, and then replies back basically with that answer to the user. And that could be a command to take an action inside of the application. It could be content generation where we're just going ahead and creating some type of text basically based off of what that prompt is. So Copilot in a very simple form is just this orchestrator that goes through and accesses that large language model. You could almost argue, Tracy, it's almost like the reasoning models that are out there, like the Omni 1 and Omni 3 that came out. It's not the same, just candidly, but the concepts are really similar in terms of how that orchestrator works. And this is really where that magic occurs then, right? Where we're starting to see more and more of these use cases that Copilot can be basically be integrated with that provide business value. And this is a key thing, I guess, Tracy, just to kind of, harp on this because it's one of those concepts where all of a sudden in the past it's been, oh my gosh, look at this shiny new object, let's try it. And from a business perspective, that's not a good thing because there's a lot of investment that can occur potentially around that where a lot of businesses just don't have the ability to invest that much money in an emergent technology because they need more use cases and more scenarios that are addressed by it. So the benefit now in my mind, Tracy, is the fact that Copilot from its evolution over 2 years now has really moved now into this quite amazing technology. And we'll talk a little bit about those use cases later, but we're seeing more and more adoption as people understand that we can control this 6 year old, as I always call it, to basically drive a lot of these different processes.
Yeah, that's really good. And I think that leads to the next conversation. And I'm just going to keep you talking. Um, Tell me where Copilot is limited. I'd like to talk about where it thrives after this, but where is it limited in its capabilities right now? You mentioned it to be a six-year old.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I'm glad you picked up on that because, this is the part that the marketing doesn't talk about. And from a partner perspective, this is where we are thought leaders around this. So with any technology that comes out, there's going to be limitations that technology can address. More specifically, it's never one size fits all. You're just in business systems, it's never been that way. You've never had it where you've got one thing or one database technology that does OLTP and OLAP, for example. There's two different ways that we look at data, for example, and that's just foundational. And there's just things that grow over time as well that add capabilities. But if we start, for example, at this base level inside of here, and I'm going to put myself on Do Not Disturb so I'm not getting pinged in the background here, but if we look at the base capabilities of Copilot, there are some things that large language models just really don't do well, and we should be talking about that. More specifically, let's back up and think about computers almost 15 to 20 years ago. 15 to 20 years ago, with computers, basically what we had was a limitation in the amount of memory that we could interact with. Everyone's heard the infamous quote that we can or cannot confirm or deny that Bill Gates made regarding 640K ought to be enough for everyone. And now we deal with memory that's in terabytes or exabytes of memory that we store inside of systems. Copilot has a very similar limitation. So the way that the Copilot or large language model architecture works, I'm not going to get into detail here because it's just techno stuff, right? I mean, it's just a lot. But what it really, if you want to summarize it, you can think about there's only so much information that a large language model can process in one swoop, just like a limitation in terms of memory. And that's going to how the transformer architecture works inside of a large language model. But what happens here is that there's this concept called tokens that even Microsoft has kind of abstracted even more from a messaging perspective. But what it really means is that there's only so much information that you can have a large language model process at once before you have to basically piece it and summarize it and get that summary back and then use that summary information. And as you can guess, then when you start doing that abstraction where you're taking detailed data, summarizing it, and maybe doing that multiple times and then sending that summary to a large language model, you start getting some really interesting answers that are not very accurate. So, one of the things that we've been really teaching people around when it comes to AI enablement is what are those really good use cases because of those limitations. So, as an example, if it's 512 kilobytes of text data that you send over to, for example, a GPT-4 Omni model, which Copilot uses, well, it's going to be limited in terms of what it can respond with. The more data you send to it, the less accurate it's going to be as part of that interaction. So when you think about it, you don't want to use usually Copilot for any of these major data analysis tasks that require a large amount of data. Examples that we've gone through even with other customers that have even used the GPT-4 5 model, which is actually in research preview right now, which also has a token limitation as well. They would say to me, for example, Scott, it just remembers the last portion of the document, but it doesn't get any of the front end of the document. And the reason for that is because it's basically kind of truncating that data because it can't remember, so to speak, what that data was before inside of that transformer architecture. Now, those reasoning models like the Omni 1 and Omni 3s, which are just different backends for it, they do better at that. But if you think about it, all they're doing is they look at the file and they say, this is too big to send it all at once. Take this chunk, send it over. Take this next chunk, send it over. So they're able to simulate a little bit more accuracy with it. But once again, the moment that you start crossing into these large amounts of data, that's not a good use case for Copilot. So like we've talked about here, Tracy, there's going to be other limitations obviously as well, but this is the big one that nobody talks about and that people should be talking about, meaning if you're going to be doing it for data analysis, probably not the best tool. If you're going to use it for limited data analysis, like let's compare last year to this year across 10 items where we send summarized data in a JSON or in a document that goes to Copilot, It does really well at that. But the moment that we start crossing into these large data sets, it's not going to be the best way to actually interact basically with Copilot. Does that make sense, Tracy? I just want to make sure that that tracks.
Yeah, no, I think that's a super good thing to do. We've talked to a lot of clients, and that seems to come up. Like, what are the big things that we can do with Copilot, and I think that it's good to like focus on where it is going. So that kind of leads me to, where is it thriving? Like, what are those things that it's really good at?
Yeah, so the first one, right? Smaller amounts of data. So it's not that it can't do data analysis, and that's the really important part here. But if you want to do, like, an example would be, look at my customer ledger entries inside of Business Central and identify of those customer ledger entries, the open ones, for example, that we're expecting not to have payment around, or if there's any influence maybe on that payment. So usually that's a refined set of invoices. Hopefully you don't have thousands and thousands of invoices open for one customer. You have maybe 10 or 5 or one of those, right? And from there you can send that data to a large language model and it can then do the analysis with it. But remember, you're not sending a large amount of data. You're doing more of those specific task-oriented results that you're trying to get to as a part of it. And this is why I call it a 6-year-old as well, because if you give it a generalized statement as a large language model, it's not going to give you really good, accurate results. And if you think about it like a 6-year-old, I have a couple of them, or I've had a couple of them. You go through that and you're like, all right, when I work with Oliver or Ariella, for example, what I'll do is I will have the strategy of what we're going to try to accomplish, but then I'm going to hand out pieces to the children to basically go through and tackle that. And this concept can be applied then towards large language models, where you can basically then devise, as you as the pilot, and that's why they call it Copilot, but you as the pilot can basically devise that strategy and then use the large language model to tackle those scenarios. So other scenarios that are really good at it. So analyzing small amounts of data, comparing data sets. So for example, in the demand planning solution that we have inside of finance and supply chain management, there's the ability basically to do comparisons of inventory turn data, and it'll show you from prior month to current month what's happened in terms of those increases or decreases of inventory that's needed for a demand plan. So that's a very limited, confined set of data then that has just a couple of rows typically that are used to do the comparison with it. It does a fantastic job at that. When it comes to content generation, so if you have like stuff that you need to create, and this is the
Mm.
best use case in my opinion of any of the Copilot or large language model capabilities. An example would be you send a shipment. With that shipment, you want to basically take the item detail that's related to it and you want to send that to Copilot. You want Copilot to create an email saying thank you for your purchase, looking at the customer record, identifying if there's any types of relationships that are on that record, puts inside of text that body that reflects that makes it more personalized for that individual. It basically then goes and finds the documentation, the PDFs that are related to it, and then appends that basically to the email. But if you think about that content generation, with every email that you could send then to interact with, you could actually have Copilot then basically make it more personalized. And we know in business that this connection, this emotional connection, is a really important part of what we do because business is all about relationships, right? So it does a fantastic job at that. The other areas, the pattern matching and automation, are becoming even more powerful now. So examples of pattern matching, going through and then analyzing smaller sets of data, or asking questions like taking an email and identifying sentiment, for example, inside of that email. Is the customer happy or are they frustrated? Things that are really basic that you take for granted can be used then to identify those different types of patterns potentially inside of an email or reacting to that. And then automation is also another important part here, Tracy, where, as an example, like what I like to talk to people about now is, why are you even entering transactions inside of a business system? When you interact with Copilot, you have the ability now to interact like it's a person at the other end of the actual conversation. And what I mean by that is, if you're using Outlook to basically go through and do transactions or interactions with people, why couldn't you send an email then to the large language model or Copilot that has it take action then? So we're looking at these different areas now where we can interact basically with machines where we would before have to write a lot of code to do that, but now we can send an email telling Copilot what to do as a part of it. So I know I took a lot of time there, Tracy, with this, but there's just a lot that this is starting to change, and we're going to have some presentations that we're going to show even on, for example, the leverage side where we've got emails that we're interacting with Copilot and we've named Copilot a name and it does all the transactions in the business system so you don't have to log into the business system to do it. So these are new concepts that didn't exist in a rapid form before that we're able to tackle now, Tracy, as we go through all of this AI enablement.
That's just fascinating. The other thing I was thinking about too, Scott, was with Copilot and the chatbot, right? So we've had for so many years, we've had chatbots, and we know that we can ask questions and get answers. And then one thing that I think there's some difference between a typical old-fashioned chatbot and what Copilot can do for us, and this is something that I'm seeing. Um, let me just give you an example. Okay, so I've got a candle, um, and I've got, let's say this is my candle company, and I have a client, and I want the client's going to come onto a website. They're going to interact with my chatbot, and they're going to say, what are the three candles that I should get based on relaxation, right? And the chatbot could go into SharePoint and it could give, like, based on some pre-built instructions, it could say to the client that's coming to our website, you should pick this candle. It's got lavender. It's great for relaxation. Okay. If we build a chatbot on Copilot, now Copilot's chatbot is going to look at files. It's going to look at our SharePoint files. It's going to look at our CRM and see what that client has done in the past for, ordering, maybe some reviews that it's left. It's going to look on the internet and kind of help us determine like relaxation and what a client's really looking for. And it's going to reason on all of that data. Okay. And then it'll come back and give me, based on the properties of the candle and based on, let's say lavender is a relaxation scent. Okay. It's going to give me the best recommendation for what I should purchase, what candle I should purchase.
Right.
So yeah, so like I just think it's really fun to see how much more personalized and evolved we're getting with our customers, from what you were talking about with content generation to something like a chatbot where we're interacting with the customers in even a more deeper way.
Right? And so much more. Like it still has the chat experience, but that is natural, right? It's easier to
Right.
do. So that's a really good example of it. And we can build on top of it rapidly as well, right? Which is pretty cool.
So fun. All right, we're going to keep moving on here. So, some of the places that you're seeing Copilot, right, is throughout that we have a chat. There's a chat application that you can Copilot. You can just chat every day, all day long. I've got it up on my other screen right here. It's constantly available to me. I can access things in my Microsoft Graph, which is everything that my company and Stoneridge has access to and has built. All of our proprietary sauces are in there, and then it can access the internet and the web and everything beyond that. And you can also see it inside every single Microsoft app. So whether you're using Word or OneNote for summarizing meeting notes, or Copilot in Teams where you're summarizing meetings or finding out where you were mentioned in a meeting, listing your to-dos. You can see it in Copilot or in PowerPoint where you're generating these PowerPoints, and maybe adding personal pictures or images to them, or actually creating the whole entire PowerPoint for you as a good starting point. There's this new application, you may have heard of it, called Loop, and it's got components in it. So you can use Loop inside of all of these other apps with Copilot enabled in all of them, and really start to get interactive in your note taking and working together. Obviously, Copilot in Outlook, where you can take something, and we're showing you all these examples in some of these other sessions today, but Copilot in Outlook, where you can be in an email, click a button, and Copilot schedules a meeting for you.
Right.
Um, Copilot in Excel, where you're analyzing your data and maneuvering. Maybe you're adding a, you know, like a column to analyze three other columns, and Copilot and Whiteboard, which is really fun tool to use in an interactive session, working session. So yeah, you're seeing Copilot in all the apps, and they're really personal to each app. So I highly recommend just starting to dig in and look at what they can do for you. Um, okay, and then extending Copilot. So Scott, can you share in these next couple of slides just a little bit about how we extend Copilot and what that means to us?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm going to keep it nice and succinct because I know we only have around 5 minutes, right, to go through. I wish we had
Okay,
a 45 to an hour session. It would be awesome. But,
yeah.
when it comes to extending it, this is the cool thing that Microsoft tackled with the architecture. You can extend the first party capabilities. And what I mean by that is the copilots that Microsoft makes, you can actually extend them. And we do that all the time, especially in the dynamics realm recently with the automated agents, which we'll talk about a little bit here as well. But know that you can take, for example, Copilot. You can go into what we call Copilot Studio and then use this low code, no code interaction to basically create topics and basically to state, hey, when this happens, run this automate or run this plugin, for example. You can take it and then publish it, for example, then inside of your company's intranet, basically. I'm summarizing that at a high level. But what you can do then is you can actually then take agents and then make them so that you have like a Business Central support agent, as an example, or a Microsoft Word support agent. Like you can build out these different agents that you can then basically expose for your end users, very similar to like an application that you're publishing. So not only can you do that inside of Copilot Studio, but you can also then go even deeper. And what I mean by that is that you can use things like Azure AI Foundry to use different models like DeepSeek or Llama, which are competitive models, or even the GPT-4.5 or reasoning models as well. If you don't want to use, for example, a low code, no code experience, you want to use the pro dev experience as a part of it. So, like I said, there's just a lot of goodness in terms of what that extensibility is inside of Copilot. And if you're not extending it yet, the biggest problem we've had as an industry has been the fact that we don't have many use cases all figured out and done because we've been working on the platform capabilities to be able to support all these needs. But now that we have the platform, the use cases are basically, it's like a floodgate being opened where all of a sudden now partners, Microsoft and others are basically extending and building out additional copilots that help your organization. So pretty exciting, Tracy, in that regard as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a spectrum of agents, right? So on a real high level, retrieval agents are going to, at my candle company, track my inventory for me. A task agent is going to monitor the progress of that um, candle inventory that I have. But an autonomous agent is going to order that inventory for me. So there's a spectrum of agents that can be created for you. And and yeah, I think if we go back to kind of the root of why invest in this, can you just give us a high level business value, why we should be kind of diving into this technology now?
Yeah, so I'll give you one example that just gets right to the point. We built a purchase support agent. That purchase support agent assists purchasers, and what it does is it monitors purchase orders that weren't received the day that they were received, and it generates an email that goes into the drafts of the purchaser that is managing basically that purchase order and says, hey, vendor, you missed this particular shipment on this day. It's impacting supply chain here. Can we get an updated receipt date so we can understand when we're going to receive that inventory? So that's one scenario. So think about like back up and abstract yourself from just the transactional intensity and focus on what a user does day in and day out. If you can automate those where now all of a sudden it's generating emails and content for it, it's monitoring short shipments or monitoring inventory that goes below a fixed reorder quantity, for example. Like these are all automation based events that you could kind of do with Power Automate. But now you can actually generate the content to then communicate that to your vendor so that basically you can interact with that agent. So the business value of these agents is going to skyrocket. Instead of us as a company that does customization, for example, around automation, we're going to be like a staff aug company, is what it feels like in some ways, because we're going to have agents that you're going to be able to install in your environment that then help your purchasers, your customer service representatives, your opportunity processing sales team members, right? You're going to have all these abilities now that are going to be extended for the content generation at a minimum that makes people go faster and can do more with less. So I think, Tracy, that's the big thing here that I want to say from the business value perspective is that start thinking about what you do in a day and what a machine could generate for content that basically can create content sometimes better than what we can create, and how it can facilitate that communication to your external parties and build those relationships. The business value is huge, which is why the industry has really doubled down on it.
That's fascinating. And just to kind of wrap up and kind of think about it from a Stoneridge perspective. So we've worked with so many clients, and we think that the best Copilot journey for you is to start by looking at that business value, right? So in addition to like your security and your um, where you're at with your foundational permissions and things like that, we think that having some business value conversations right off the bat is a really good idea. And then we've put together something called Flight School, where you take, and we just start with, let's say, 10 of your employees, 10 people in your company that can shout to the mountains about what Copilot can do for them. Uh, and take them through what we call Flight School, which is just a user adoption practice that trains them on how to use Copilot as a personal agent, builds a foundation of personal use, and then on top of that, do some of these agent building ideas and take the business value and really put it to work for you. So we've got this journey that we like to take clients on. And if you're interested in that, we'll give you some information. But Scott, if you could just kind of wrap us up and tell us what you think your modern day partner should do and should be for you.
Yeah, I mean we've crossed. So I felt it almost 10 years, 11 years ago when I joined Stoneridge. Like a partner needs to be more than just a business system partner. They have to understand all of the different Microsoft technologies in order to align the right tool for you to do the right job. And I think that that's just a really critical component now with Copilot. And it's been something that Stoneridge has been uniquely positioned around, where we just didn't focus on AX back in the day or Nav back in the day. We expanded really those capabilities so that our customers could use the best tool for the best job, right? We're not trying to force a tool into what the job is for a requirement, right? So, like I said, I think us being part of the inner circle, for example, us being a gold certified partner, us knowing M365, D365, and Azure as an example, allows you to actually then use Copilot much more impactfully inside of your organization. So once again, if your partner is not doing that or is not talking about that, that that means they're falling behind, because there's not going to be partners out there that can really just hyper focus on just the business system. They're going to need to know how to use Excel to actually analyze data to send it then back to the business system, for example. And that's going to be just critical here in the future, Tracy, is that that partner is going to have to know those applications to really then support the initiatives that you more than likely are going to have for your technology platform. So, like I said, the modern day partner is going to be one that does everything.
I love it. That's great. And then to wrap up, finally, if you're interested in learning more about our flight plan and that journey that you can take with Stoneridge, you can click take a picture, snap a picture of the QR code, and we would be happy to talk with you and further. Obviously, we ran out of time here, but we're just really happy to have been with you today and sharing a little bit about what we've learned in the Copilot journey so far.
Absolutely. Really appreciate everyone's time, and thank you again.
Thank you.